Hey guys, this is Jessica at Stash Studio, and I'm here today to show you how to create some fun clay headstones. So we've got a couple of different shape options here, and I'm going to show you how easy this really is. So the Stash staff should have gotten you a clay slab here, and then we have some templates that are going to make it really so super simple to create these shapes. And if we don't have a certain shape that you would like, you can see here basically we folded a sheet of paper in half and drew out our shape and then cut it out of just some scrap paper here so that it's nice and symmetrical. So you could definitely do that if you'd like. You should have a stick for slipping and scoring and a little bit of water. And that's about all you will need. Of course, you have access to any of our texture tools that we have in our clay area, and we can gladly show you where that is. And you might want to use this tool, the loop tool, to carve out and kind of create some recessed areas, but you just have to be careful about doing that, and I'll show you when the time comes. You can just kind of get your clay a little too thin. So one thing about this is you can see you want the headstones to be strong enough to stay up, and you can see this clay is really still bendy. It's best to work with a little bit drier clay for this particular type of project. So we're going to go ahead and work with this, but just keep in mind you might need to use the blow dryer, but you want to use it very gradually and very sparingly. You don't want to take your clay too dry because that can cause issues in and of itself. So what we're going to do first is kind of work from the edges of your clay slab, especially if you're doing more than one. Let's just go ahead and do this shape here so it kind of fits right in there. I'm going to lay my template down and use my stick, and I'm going all the way through the clay and holding the template in place with my left hand and just dragging the stick through. Notice I'm holding the stick very close to the edge, not up here because it'll break. And it's just dragging through the clay, and we've got our shape here. So, and as I said, you can see this isn't very self-supporting. Dryer, we're gonna set this to the side and let it dry while we're working on our other things. So I'm just gonna kind of ball this up over here because it's too small to be used. And then this looks about the right size. You can kind of gauge it. Nope, this one over here. So I wanna gauge how big my base needs to be. And I can just kind of freehand that here, okay? And when I was gathering my supplies, the one thing that I did forget to grab is our stamps that we have so that you can add in any of the words that you want. So we have those available for you to use in our texture buckets. You can just ask to be pointed in the right direction, and you're welcome to just kind of rummage through, scrummage, is that a word? Just made it one, huh? Our boxes of fun supplies, clay supplies. All right, so you can see I'm just kind of smoothing out the edges. Not too worried about it. Of course, this is an old headstone, so we want it to look a little spooky and imperfect and everything else. So just smoothing it out a little bit. Now I promised to show you how to kind of make this raised part, for lack of a better word. And this clay, like I said, might be a little too wet. I might need to go over to the blow dryer. But I'm gonna give myself like a little line to work to so that I don't get carried away. So I'm just gonna kind of mimic the outside line. And the reason you need to be careful with this, we're gonna be taking away clay. You can see it's just kind of dragging some clay up. is that it can be too weak to hold itself up. So especially when I was making this one I was using this loop tool here, and it got really, really thin, so much so that like you can see I had to reinforce around the bottom there to make it actually stand up. So you just kind of have to be careful, and sometimes there's just happy little accidents, as Bob Ross would say, you have to get creative with some solutions is all. So I don't want to take away too much clay. I probably did right there, actually. I'm just trying to kind of get it away from the edge so that it looks raised around the edge. And then I can kind of press the rest of this clay. I got it too thin right in here, so I'm trying to move some of this clay upward and put it back in. And if you're making more than one, that's actually a good thing, because while you're making your others, it gives all of this a time to kind of dry and set up a little bit so that it's more self-supporting. As clay dries, it gets more sturdy and able to stand up on its own. And so that's why you can go ahead and just make these headstones. And you want to go, if I had brought my stamp tools over here where I'm working right now, then I would go ahead after I get this part finished, and I would just go ahead and stamp while the clay's kind of moist still. But see how that's given the impression of that recessed type of headstone. Can you kind of use the tool, the edge of the tool to kind of give it some definition. And so see, we're still really, really flimsy and really thin right there. So I'm gonna set this aside to dry. You can see I just made a little bit of grass there. So all you gotta do to do that is just kind of take some of these extras, put them in a ball, kind of push them a little flat. I like to tap the bottom. This gives you a flat edge here. And then just rough it up. So got some spooky grass, and that would go on the base of that headstone when we put that there. So let me show you a few things about this one. It's much the same, just a different shape, obviously. And then you've got that little skeleton and roof. So while this other one dries, I'll show you this one. So that's the pointy house shape, and it fits perfectly kind of right there. Let's see if we can get that. Again, we're holding everything in place, nice and tight, so it doesn't break or move. We've got the house part. So now we just need the roof part and the base. So let's see what we can work out here. So I think if we just kind of straighten that up. Base of this one's really narrow, so that one works. And then we just need to have some little rectangular shapes. Not too thick. So you can see this isn't perfect. Just use your fingers to kind of push it back down into a rectangle shape. Kind of smooth it up. Notice I haven't used any water. When clay is wet like this, you really shouldn't need to use water. You can use water at the very end to kind of get the super duper big chunks and smooth it down. But like I said, we really want this to look spooky and old and craggly and scraggly. And so why would you want to smooth it down too much? So you can see, maybe we can form this into like a rectangle too. Waste not, want not, and all that jazz, huh? So It's about the same size. Okay, so these are our roof things right here, roof whatever, shingles I guess maybe. All right, so just to make sure that they kind of fit, and they do. So I'm gonna set this to the side. I'm not putting anything together yet, so you can just kind of hold off on that. And now this cross is a little tricky because it's kind of some small detail work. But basically I kind of give myself a rough outline and I make it a little bit bigger than I actually want it because I'm gonna probably compress it back down to get some of the clay boogers out. So once you kind of have a sketch, then you can start going a little bit deeper and deeper on each pass. Until you've kind of worked yourself through the clay. You should be able to kind of pull it out, and then we're just gonna kind of tuck all those frayed edges and clay boogers back onto the cross, kind of clean it up a little bit. Of course, you can just sculpt one from a chunk of clay if you'd like. Just all depends on your preference. Of course, you can sculpt something else to go. Maybe you want a crow or a pumpkin or something else to go on top of your tombstone here, and you're welcome to take your own creative liberties as usual here at Stash. We're here to help if you have any questions, but basically you would either just sculpt from a chunk of clay, or you could cut it right out from your slab here. You don't want anything too heavy sitting on top of your tombstone, remember, so whatever you do is gonna have to be kind of flat. All right, so we've got that. And now let's talk about this little skeleton guy that's in there. It says empty tomb, but there's definitely a skeleton head. So I started with, actually, again, you can either sculpt or you can just draw it out. So I just kind of started with an oval. All right. And if you want, you can kind of pinch in the bottom of the oval like this, and it'll kind of make a more, the skeleton's kind of round. But I got to thinking later, if you kind of pinched it in like this at the bottom, kind of creates more of that skull shape. Okay, and then I like to use the back of my tool for the eyes. Just have 2 slits for the nose right there. And then I did some slits for the teeth. I had a lot of clay on my, and there's your little skeleton. Okay, so again, this clay is still probably very too flexible and not self-supporting. See how it's like wanting to slump over? So if I weren't videoing right now, I would definitely go hit this with the blow dryer. And when you are blow drying, you can ask staff for sure if you need to blow dry, if you're wondering. But if it humps over like this, when you go to stand it up straight, you know that you need to blow dry. We recommend doing about 30 seconds on either side. So 30 seconds with it kind of like far away. We're not really close up, far away. And then we're flipping it over and doing the other side, kind of rechecking it to see if it stands on its own, because you don't want to take it too far. And again, that's after you've already put any of these carved details that you want to do into it. All right, so this one has the little circle house, so I'm going to use the loop tool instead of the straight edge side, and that's going to help me kind of carve the loop at the top. And I'm not going to get it too thin down at the bottom again like I did before, because that's what gave me the trouble. So I'm going to kind of leave it kind of thick down at the bottom. And then our skeleton can kind of go in there. So whenever you're attaching 2 pieces of clay, you have to remember to do this. This is called scoring. So it's basically just a roughing it up. Think about how before you paint furniture, you sand it so that the paint will stick better. And then I'm tapping in the water. This is creating a little bit of slip in here with the clay, mixing with the clay a little bit. I'm gonna kind of rough this up here. And then we're gonna give it a gentle push and wiggle so that it really sticks in there. And then those two pieces are good and together. All right, so the same thing here. We're roughing this up. Okay. I like to rough up just both sides just in case. It's just always a good idea. A lot of the gnomes that we had made, I could see the score marks, like the hats were falling off. I could see the score marks, but it was as if they weren't like deep enough and they weren't really pushed together well. So really push those on and give it a good wiggle until you feel it lock into place. Okay, and notice I'm not smoothing out lines like this. I'm kind of tapping so that those lines stay and that it makes that slip. All right, and then I'm just giving it a good smush and wiggle, and I can kind of smush those two together into one piece at the top. I'm a little bit longer over here. I'm gonna pull this clay out a little bit and make it kind of match here. Okay, so here's where I would do, you know, after you put this together, if you haven't already blow dried or if you haven't done your letters yet, make sure you're putting your letters here. This is still really floppy. We're scratching here, scratching here. I'm gonna kind of just give this a little tap at the top to kind of flatten it out. Tap, tap, tap. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. All right. And then we're ready to slip and score it to here. Okay, and you can see it doesn't stand up. Honestly, it wouldn't, I don't think, hurt it to just let it dry like this. You can see this one, can y'all see how it's kind of slumping a little bit? But I kind of like that because it's old. Maybe it's fallen over, centuries old, even though it says 2021. Yeah, so I think it would be fine for them to just like dry like this if you were worried about them falling over, honestly. So this is the tutorial on the tombstones. So don't hesitate to pull us over, guys, if you have any questions or if anything isn't clear. If you need to know where any of the tools are, we'll be glad to help you out. And we're so glad that you created with us today. And we hope that you have a spooky Halloween.